Photographer John Grady from Schenectady, New York, recorded over 50,000 stock car racing images from the late 1950s to the early 2000s. He began taking photos with track photographer Irv Conran at Menands Speedway, New York in the late 50s, primarily black and white. These photos were taken for print and press, and also my dad made a few bucks selling photos. John was one of the first to take color at night. Getting the proper light and adjusting for the film of the day was a challenge. John mastered that and started selling photos to me, and he met many press obligations. I remember many times as a young boy seeing my dad print pictures down in the basement, and the night of Renee Charlene's fire, which I'll talk a little bit about later, he actually fell asleep on the enlarger printing the pictures because he had a feeling that that photo was going to be needed. Utica Rome Speedway in New York, 1961, provided John with his first position as track photographer. He befriended Joe Lessick, the track builder and promoter. He made the weekly haul from Utica on Sunday nights to take photos and manage a photo stand. He worked there till the track was sold, and Joe Lessick built the new Albany-Saratoga Speedway in 1965. Closer to home and with the endorsement of modified champion Renee Charlene, John became the track photographer. John was the only photographer at Albany-Saratoga for 15 years, and he noted for the famous fire photo of the then sportsman modified champion Renee Charlene. When his car caught on fire in May 1966, Eddie Flemke, my dad told, ran into the flames and saved Renee when his foot was hooked on the steering wheel as he was trying to get out of the vehicle. John often, or my father often commented it was the bravest thing he ever witnessed in racing. He went to Eddie afterwards and commented on it, and Eddie said he would have done the same for me. And then my father's response, which is, he said, "Are you sure?" He often talked about that photo, and I actually, through the use of eBay, actually had the third issue of Gator, which he often said he got that paper started. Has Renee's fire picture on the cover. And they actually had to reprint more of them back then. It was only the third issue at that time of Gator Racing News. So the New England connection in Massachusetts, and I think one of the reasons why he's here, outside of all that, is that his friendship with Harvey Tattersall in United Racing led him to racetracks in Massachusetts in the 60s and 70s. He would often go as frequently as possible to Eastern States Exposition, Riverside Park, Norwood Arena, West Haven, to mention a few. He would take photos and talk to drivers. He really had the gift of gab and also really enjoyed what he did. He also made a few extra bucks at it, which he always bragged about. At Riverside Park, you know, he would talk about being there and dodging the track photographer Shaney at the time, who had the rights to sell photos. And I think the agreement was made with Harvey Tattersall that John can take pictures, but he can't sell pictures at Riverside Park. He would often talk about those times and kind of laugh as he was dodging the security guy running around the pits. In the early 80s at Valasor's Racerama is when the oldie generation started with my dad, where he started selling photos. And I remember being there in the early 80s selling them off a park bench. And I had a person come up and actually buy every photo that I had, individual photos. And he said, "I'll take all that you have." Well, I handed my dad a $100 bill and a $50 bill, and his eyes lit up as the Irishman in him. He said, "Hey kid, we're gonna make some money." This became an annual event for us for many years, and Val offered him a courtesy spot, as my dad was never a fan of paying to get into races or rent for racing shows. As a matter of fact, I still think he owes Val some rent from a few of those Raceramas. These were fun times and many racing stories as Billy Greco and Bugsy and people would come up and tell stories, and they'd laugh and look at old photographs. This was really a fun time. So we did this for many years, starting in the early 80s right up to when the show was no longer running. Although his career as a photographer, he wrote for many racing columns. He wrote for the Daily Gazette in Schenectady, New York, a stock car column, Union Star in Schenectady. He contributed many photos to Speedway Scene, Trackside Magazine, Gator Racing News, as I mentioned, Area Auto Racing News, Illustrated Speedway News, National Speed Sport, among others. He was an elementary school teacher for 25 years, and he considered his students some of his finest works. Bob Novak, who's here with me today, myself, and a former NEAR member, Bruce Kosis, took my dad's images on the road in the last 20 years. Racing shows and nostalgia nights at tracks until my dad turned 85. This year I started the first ever nostalgia night at Albany Saratoga Speedway. Old race car drivers, and my dad's photos were on display. And next year will be a memorial night for my dad at that nostalgia night, which will be in August 2019. This past August, my dad died of dementia at 88. Also, Bruce died in March of 2016, so Bob Novak and I are still carrying the tradition of Grady photos on the road, if you will. One last quote I want to talk about was Jeff Bodine, who sent my dad on his 87th birthday a nice note, and he said, "John, with social media, your images will last forever." And I would have to think this is true, as I've seen many people here today. We've talked about Facebook and still seeing my dad's photos. Also with Lou Boyd's books, there's a lot of his photos are still there. The Lebanon Valley book, I've noticed a few in there, and it's great to see his pictures are still out there. I want to thank Nir Valisor and the members of this organization for this media award.